Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of Joe Biden's alleged cancer or supposed cancer, or the timing of the discovery of the cancer. Probably it's more to the point. And my take on this is that just as accountability is starting to close in on Biden, and particularly his handlers, the auto pen handlers and the propaganda handlers and so on that operated around him, all globalist goons and stooges, by the way. They think that, okay, what do we need? We need a media blitz to try and wriggle out of this responsibility. I know. Let's say Joe's got terminal cancer and he could die at any minute. And then anyone that questions us or talks about Joe, we say, "Oh, how mean you are! The guy's about to die from cancer. You creepy, meanie motherfucker Nazi!" And that gives them the cover story to dive under the desk and escape, as they would see it, accountability, or at least have a media campaign of deflection and diversion. Now, the guy may have cancer, by the way. I don't doubt that. But if he has cancer, he's had it for a while. And the idea that they've suddenly discovered today or yesterday is bullshit, in my view. Now, what am I basing this on? You say, well, you're a doctor? No, I'm not a doctor. But I've been taking relatively close care of elderly relatives, and have become intimately involved in blood tests, their meaning, their interpretation, follow-up testing. Well, this blood test means that we have to do more tests, and the sort of tests we need to do are this. And so I've become quite expert at, as much as a layperson can be, I've become quite expert at interpreting blood tests and having a look at their relevance and doing the research. So, well, if the blood level of this and so many parts of per million or whatever in the testing reveal, well, this suggests or implies cancer. Not sure of which cancer, because this test will detect the existence of cancer cells generally, and then more specific tests are required, and on it goes. So I've been in the middle and the top and bottom of all that for again, elderly relatives, also about the same age as Biden, by the way. So anyway, so I can speak from some knowledge on this subject and how it goes. Now, depending on the cancer, there are different sorts of cancer. Now, the prostate cancer jumping into the bones, I'm not sure I buy that. Not that it can't happen, by the way, but if there is that aggressive nature of cancer, then it was known years ago. Several years ago. I would think 5 to 6 years ago, this would have been identified. Now, once someone's got this, you've probably got cancer, particularly someone who's got access to the very best healthcare and access to the best doctors and this sort of stuff, as Biden would have had, say, as vice president or even just a serving member of the Congress. They've got access to, they don't have to worry about, can I afford to see the doctor, or can I afford for these tests? Now, if once a likely cancer is detected, this idea that there's just every 12 months they get a blood test, that's for the great unwashed, that sort of stuff. That doesn't happen for people who've got top of the range healthcare. The tests and the whether they be blood samples or anything else, the tests would have been relentless. There would have been, one test every few weeks, testing for this, testing for that, taking more blood is, and the test, the general test that somebody gets covers a whole range of things. How much vitamin E you've got, this, or do you have this or that, and a whole range of things. But specifically looking at the issues in and around cancer. Once the cancer has been detected on the basis of you have a cancer, we don't specifically know what cancer. There may be a further breakdown of, the likelihood is that you have prostate cancer. The likelihood is you have. So there's sort of overall, bigger picture type assessments of you have cancer and what cancer it might be. And then there are further tests that isolate it specifically and directly look for cancerous activity in, for example, the prostate or anywhere else. So that happens. And again, with the sort of healthcare that Biden had access to, they would have jumped all over that, and he'd have had numerous tests, follow-up tests, very specific tests, very targeted tests in all sorts of areas. I mean, blood tests primarily, but also looking even to the point of maybe taking a small bone sample and skin samples and so on. So he would have had the very best. So it would have been apparent very quickly, when I say very quickly, within a few months, what sort of cancer he had and how far advanced it was, and the overall risk it proposed, and also the sort of treatment and medication. If you catch cancer early, for example, the sort of medication treatment you receive is quite a bit different from cancer that is much more advanced. So they would have got Biden's cancer very early. Again, he has access to the very best healthcare. He doesn't have to worry about the cost of, for example, if I want to have blood tests, I can get one. I think it's one a year you're allowed in Australia, so it's rationed. Yeah. But if some particular malignant cancer is found, then I have to pay quite heavy rates. Like $400, $500, $600 for some of the blood tests that are needed to precisely determine the level of or type of or how advanced it is cancer. But Biden would have had to worry about any of that. It would have all been fully paid for, and again, the very best doctors, best hospitals, and best laboratories to do the blood testing and so on. So they would have got to that very early, and they would have been proposing remedies and the like. Now, whether or not he was or wasn't on medication, how far the cancer was, assuming again he has it. I mean, to what extent is the whole story a deflection and diversion? He's in the right age group to have those sort of cancers. I'm not sure I buy that it's advanced or suddenly became advanced. I don't buy that. I know how long these things take, and the sort of cancers that are debilitating, and the sort of drugs that would produce the sort of outcomes in. But I think Biden did have dementia. I think it was already in evidence. Even in 2020, when he was debating, the sort of the press conferences he had, it was already absolutely clear that he had debilitating mental conditions already then. I'm surprised that he made it through that 2020 debate with Trump. I was staggered that he made it, because I'd seen so many raw footage of Biden, and I thought, this guy's going to last 5 minutes of debate. So I don't know what they pumped him up with, but he made it through that debate. I mean, I don't think he did well. The media, anchors ran cover for him, and the parts where he fumbled and so on were edited out. So the versions that everybody, I mean, for example, I was talking to a senior public servant in Australia not long ago, and he was saying, I think Biden should have stayed on for that election. He'd have beaten Trump. I said, well, what makes you? Now, this is a guy on being paid $500,000 a year, by the way, like he's at the upper echelons of the public service in Australia. And he was very presidential, and he was this idea that his cognitive powers were in decline is just Hitler is saying that. I was stunned. I mean, can you? But remember, he only looks at CNN and those sort of things, where you get the heavily edited, 2-second soundbite type things, where Biden does look okay, and that's all he sees. So he bases his view on that. But this is a guy, this public servant is a guy who would refuse to look at any other alternative. He's determined to only take a particular view, and therefore only wants news and information that supports that view. The idea that Biden's a blithering idiot, even in 2020, clearly a puppet that was controlled by others. He isn't even prepared to contemplate that. So coming back though to the cancer, which is the main point of this vid, Biden may or may not have cancer. I don't doubt it. He's in the right age range. if he did have cancer, they would have identified it years ago and would have prescribed treatments. Now, remember, they only needed Biden, the handlers only needed Biden as a puppet. The folks operating the auto pen, they don't get cancer. Haven't got the auto pen doesn't get cancer. So they only need Biden as the puppet. Whether he lived or died was kind of irrelevant. His use was as a puppet, and they could control they could rig elections and install their puppets at will, which they recently did in Romania, for example, or Canada. So my take on it, just again, having immersed myself, because of my relatives, having immersed myself in this area, is that if Biden had cancer, they knew about it years ago, easily 5 years ago, and if not earlier. And the treatments that he would have been received, given how they picked it up so early, would not have been debilitating treatments. The idea is that that he got a cancer drug that caused amnesia or something. I don't buy that. If they got to it early, which they would have, because the level of healthcare he's receiving, whether as vice president or again as a member of Congress, he had the very best healthcare you could get in the United States, if not the world. So any drugs that he was on would have been the mildest forms, have the least effect on him. I mean, some cynics are saying, well, his handlers wanted him drugged up, so he didn't know what day it was, and that just made him more docile and easier to handle. They just had to wheel him out every now and again to say that white supremacy and Nazis are everywhere. And that was it. So I don't buy this idea that aggressive cancer suddenly been discovered. That's a load of bullshit in my view. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.